You wake up in the morning, you haven't eaten a single bite, and yet your blood sugar is already climbing. If you've ever looked at that number and felt confused, frustrated, or even blamed yourself, there's something you need to hear. This isn't a failure of willpower, and it's not about what you ate. What most people don't realize is that the most dangerous blood sugar spikes often happen before breakfast, driven by a silent hormonal surge your body goes through every morning. Between early dawn and mid-morning, your system releases stress hormones that can flood your bloodstream with glucose without any food involved. This happens to almost everyone with diabetes, yet it's rarely explained clearly in a doctor's office. And here's where things get uncomfortable, because if you've been told that controlling blood sugar is mainly about avoiding carbs or taking medication on time, then you may have been focusing on the wrong enemy. The real threat isn't just on your plate, it's an invisible process that starts the moment you open your eyes, quietly pushing your metabolism in the wrong direction. The consequences don't show up all at once. They build slowly. Morning after morning of elevated glucose trains your body to stay insulin resistant longer, keeps your liver releasing excess sugar, and sets the stage for fatigue cravings and unstable numbers the rest of the day. By the time fasting glucose looks a little high, a significant amount of metabolic damage may already be underway. But here's the part that rarely gets discussed, and the reason this matters so much. That same early morning window, the one working against you right now, can also be used to regain control. What you do in the first minutes after waking sends powerful signals to your hormones, your liver, and your muscles. Signals that can either amplify the problem or shut it down before it spirals. If you stay with this, you're going to understand why your mornings have been sabotaging your blood sugar without you realizing it, and what needs to change before the day even begins. What you're experiencing in the morning isn't random, and it isn't a personal failure. It's a predictable biological event that almost no one explains clearly. The first thing you need to understand is this: your blood sugar can rise sharply before breakfast because your body is following a built-in survival program. In the early morning hours, usually between 4 and 8 a.m., your brain sends a signal that it's time to wake up and get moving. To prepare you, your body releases cortisol and other counter-regulatory hormones. These hormones don't ask whether you plan to eat or stay in bed. Their job is to make sure glucose is available in your bloodstream immediately. The problem is how your liver responds. Your liver acts like an emergency fuel warehouse. When cortisol rises, the liver releases stored glucose even if your blood sugar is already high. In someone without diabetes, insulin quickly clears that glucose. But when insulin resistance is present, that sugar has nowhere to go. It stays in circulation, quietly pushing your numbers higher before you've done anything wrong. This process has a name in research literature: early morning hepatic glucose output. And here's the uncomfortable truth: it happens even if you skipped dinner, ate perfectly the day before, or followed every rule you were given. The damage isn't loud or dramatic, it's slow and subtle. Morning after morning of elevated fasting glucose trains your body to remain insulin resistant longer into the day. Your liver becomes more aggressive at releasing sugar. Your cells become less responsive. Over time, this pattern increases, fatigue intensifies cravings, and makes later meals harder to control, not because you're weak, but because your metabolism was pushed off balance before breakfast even started. You might recognize the signs without realizing what's behind them. You wake up feeling foggy or anxious. Your heart rate feels slightly elevated. You crave coffee immediately, sometimes before water. You check your glucose and feel defeated before the day begins. These are not psychological reactions, they are physiological responses to a hormone-driven glucose surge. Studies show that fasting glucose readings can be 10 to 30 points higher in the morning, purely due to this hormonal effect independent of food intake. In people with long-standing insulin resistance, the impact can be even greater. By the time fasting glucose consistently reads borderline high, a significant amount of metabolic strain may already be in place. Here's what changes everything. This morning surge is not permanent, and it's not unstoppable. It's responsive. The liver doesn't release glucose at random, it responds to signals. And those signals can be altered within minutes of waking. That's the real opportunity most people miss. Instead of fighting blood sugar all day with restriction and frustration, the most effective leverage point happens before the problem fully unfolds. When you intervene early, you interrupt the hormonal cascade that keeps glucose elevated for hours. This isn't about medication changes or extreme protocols. It's about understanding timing sequence and how the body interprets early morning cues. Once you see that blood sugar is rising, because your system is misreading its environment, the solution becomes far more practical and far less intimidating. But there's a catch. Knowing why this happens isn't enough. The body needs a clear signal that the emergency is over, and that signal has to come before cortisol and liver output lock in for the day. And the fastest way to send that signal doesn't involve food at all. It starts with something far more basic, something almost everyone overlooks the moment they wake up. If you want to stop your liver from flooding your bloodstream with glucose, the next step happens before coffee, before movement, and before breakfast, and missing it can undo everything else. Once you understand that your liver is releasing glucose because it thinks your body is under stress, the next question becomes unavoidable. What signal convinces it to stop? For most people with diabetes, that signal is missing for one simple reason: you wake up dehydrated and your body interprets dehydration as danger. During the 6 to 8 hours you sleep, you don't drink any fluids, but your body doesn't stop losing water. You continue breathing out moisture, sweating lightly, and producing urine. By the time you wake up, you are often in a state of mild but meaningful dehydration, and this matters far more than most people realize. Here's the mechanism. When your blood volume drops due to dehydration, glucose becomes more concentrated in the bloodstream. This alone can make fasting numbers look higher than they truly are. But the deeper problem is hormonal. Dehydration increases stress signaling, which tells your liver to keep releasing glucose just in case. From the body's perspective, low fluid equals potential threat. At the cellular level, dehydration makes things worse. Insulin receptors depend on proper hydration to maintain membrane flexibility. When cells are underhydrated, insulin signaling becomes less efficient. Glucose transporters slow down. Sugar stays trapped in the blood longer, not because insulin disappeared, but because the cells aren't responding the way they should. The consequences build quietly. Morning dehydration reinforces insulin resistance, prolongs hepatic glucose output, and makes blood sugar harder to control for hours afterward. You may feel it as early fatigue, lightheadedness, or an immediate need for caffeine. Many people confuse these signals for low energy, when in reality the brain is reacting to thickened blood and unstable glucose delivery. Research consistently shows that hydration status directly affects glucose regulation. Studies have found that individuals who are even mildly dehydrated experience higher fasting glucose, and reduced insulin sensitivity while increasing water intake can lower fasting glucose by 12 to 20 points within a short window. This isn't a long-term diet effect, it's a rapid physiological response. This is where timing becomes everything. Drinking water later in the morning helps, but it doesn't reverse the initial hormonal cascade. The liver has already acted. Cortisol has already peaked. The window of leverage is small, and it exists within the first 5 minutes after waking, when your digestive system is empty and absorption is fastest. Temperature matters too. Ice-cold water can slow gastric emptying and delay hydration signals. Room temperature or slightly warm water is absorbed more efficiently and sends a clearer message to the nervous system that resources are available. This is not about preference, it's about speed and signaling. When you drink water immediately upon waking, several things happen at once. Blood viscosity decreases, circulation improves, kidney filtration ramps up, allowing excess glucose to be cleared more effectively. Most importantly, the stress message to the liver softens. The body no longer feels the need to flood the bloodstream with emergency fuel. The benefits extend beyond glucose alone. Proper morning hydration supports blood pressure, regulation reduces cardiovascular strain, and improves cognitive clarity. Many people notice sharper focus and fewer cravings within minutes, not hours. That mental clarity matters because decision-making early in the day strongly influences what you eat next. The application is simple, but precision matters. A full glass of plain water, about 16 ounces, consumed within minutes of waking before coffee, before checking your phone before movement. No additives, no sweeteners, just water delivered at the right moment. In terms of safety, this habit is low risk for the vast majority of people. Those with fluid restrictions should follow medical guidance, but for most individuals with diabetes, early hydration is one of the safest and most overlooked interventions available. But hydration alone doesn't complete the signal. Water tells your body that resources are available, yet it doesn't tell it how those resources will be used. Without one more input, glucose may still linger in the bloodstream longer than it should. And that's where the next step becomes critical, because unless your muscles receive the right message, the sugar you just stabilized has nowhere to go. Once hydration has sent the message that resources are available, your body still needs one critical instruction: what to do with the glucose already circulating in your blood. Without that instruction, sugar doesn't disappear, it lingers. And this is where most people unknowingly lose control of their entire morning. During sleep, your muscles naturally become more insulin resistant. This isn't a flaw, it's part of your circadian rhythm. Around early morning, especially near the cortisol peak, muscle cells temporarily stop responding efficiently to insulin. If nothing changes, that resistance can persist for hours, keeping glucose trapped in the bloodstream well into late morning. This is where gentle movement changes everything. Muscle contraction activates a powerful metabolic pathway known as AMPK, often described as a master energy switch. When AMPK turns on, muscles begin pulling glucose directly out of the blood without relying on insulin at all. This pathway bypasses the very resistance that makes mornings so difficult for people with diabetes. Think of your muscles like a sponge. When they're inactive, glucose has nowhere to go. The moment they contract, they start absorbing sugar rapidly, safely storing it as glycogen instead of letting it circulate and cause damage. The consequences of skipping this step are subtle but significant. Blood sugar remains elevated longer. The liver keeps releasing glucose unnecessarily. You may feel restless, tense, or mentally scattered. Many people describe it as wired but tired. That feeling isn't random, it's glucose overload combined with stress hormones and idle muscle tissue. Research makes this effect impossible to ignore. Studies show that just 10 minutes of low-intensity movement can reduce blood glucose by 20 to 40 points, often within the same hour. Even more important, insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue remains elevated for up to 16 hours afterward. That means breakfast, lunch, and dinner are all processed more efficiently because of what you did earlier that morning. But intensity matters. High-intensity workouts too early in the day can backfire. They raise cortisol and adrenaline, which may temporarily increase blood sugar instead of lowering it. This is where many people make a critical mistake, believing that harder is always better. What works best is gentle, rhythmic movement. Walking, light stretching, slow mobility work, or easy yoga. These movements activate large muscle groups without triggering a stress response. Walking is especially effective because the muscles in your legs contain a high concentration of GLUT4 transporters, the molecular gates that move glucose into muscle cells during contraction. The benefits extend beyond glucose control. Gentle morning movement improves circulation, increases nitric oxide release, and allows blood vessels to relax. Blood pressure often drops by 5 to 15 points in people who practice consistent early activity. Joints loosen, stiffness fades, and the body transitions smoothly from sleep into wakefulness instead of being shocked into it. There's also a psychological shift that happens. Movement reduces excess cortisol, releases endorphins, and improves mood clarity. Many people notice less anxiety and fewer cravings later in the morning. This isn't motivation, it's chemistry. When your nervous system senses movement, it interprets it as productive energy use, not stress. Application doesn't require gym equipment or perfect conditions. 10 minutes is enough, around your home, down the street, or even pacing indoors. The key is timing before breakfast, while the stomach is empty and muscles are primed to absorb glucose efficiently. From a safety perspective, this approach is low risk and adaptable. You move at your own pace. You stop if needed. For most people with diabetes, gentle morning movement is not only safe, it's protective, reducing long-term cardiovascular and metabolic risk when done consistently. But there's one final piece that determines whether this glucose control lasts or collapses within an hour. After hydration and movement, your body is finally receptive. Muscles are open, hormones are settling. Now the question becomes what you feed the system first, because the next thing you eat can either lock in this stability or undo it faster than you realize. After hydration has calmed the stress response and movement has opened your muscles, your body enters a rare state of receptivity. Glucose is being cleared, cortisol is settling, insulin sensitivity is temporarily improved. And at this exact moment, the first food you choose sends a message that can either stabilize your blood sugar for hours or unravel everything you've just set up. This is where breakfast quietly becomes the most influential meal of the day. Overnight, your body is in a catabolic state. To survive the fasting period, it breaks down a small amount of muscle tissue to release amino acids for energy and glucose production. If that breakdown continues into the morning, insulin resistance worsens because muscle is your primary glucose storage site. Less muscle means fewer places for sugar to go. Protein is what stops that process. When you eat protein, first several mechanisms activate almost immediately. One of the most important is GLP-1, a hormone released by your gut that slows gastric emptying, enhances insulin secretion, and reduces post-meal glucose spikes. GLP-1 is so effective that pharmaceutical versions are used as diabetes medications, yet your body can release it naturally in response to protein. Protein also stimulates muscle protein synthesis, shifting your body from breakdown to repair. This preserves lean muscle mass, which directly improves long-term glucose disposal. Without enough protein in the morning, blood sugar control becomes progressively harder over time, regardless of how carefully you eat later. The consequences of skipping this step are subtle but persistent. A carbohydrate-heavy breakfast cereal toast pastries causes glucose to rise quickly, while insulin is still sluggish. Blood sugar spikes, then crashes. Hunger returns early. Cravings intensify. Many people mistake this cycle for poor discipline, when in reality the metabolic signal was wrong from the start. You may recognize the pattern. You feel fine right after eating, then tired an hour later. You reach for snacks mid-morning, focus drops. Mood shifts. These aren't character flaws, they're physiological responses to rapid glucose swings triggered by the absence of protein. Research consistently shows that breakfast composition matters. Studies comparing protein-rich breakfasts to carbohydrate-dominant ones have found 30% lower post-meal glucose levels, improved insulin response, and reduced appetite throughout the day. To trigger these effects, quantity matters. Most evidence points to 25 to 35 grams of high-quality protein as the threshold for meaningful metabolic impact. Eggs are one of the most effective options. They provide complete amino acids, healthy fats that slow digestion, and nutrients, like choline, that support liver function. Greek yogurt is another strong choice, delivering high protein with minimal carbohydrate when unsweetened, along with probiotics that influence insulin sensitivity through the gut-brain-pancreas axis. The benefits extend beyond blood sugar alone. Protein has the highest thermic effect of any macronutrient, meaning your body burns more calories digesting it. It increases satiety hormones, reduces total daily calorie intake without conscious restriction, and stabilizes energy levels. Many people naturally eat less later in the day simply because their morning signal was correct. Application is straightforward, but timing is critical. Protein should come within 30 minutes of waking after hydration and movement, while muscles are primed to absorb nutrients efficiently. You don't need complexity, you need consistency and sequence. From a safety perspective, this approach is well tolerated for most people. Those with specific kidney or protein restriction guidelines should individualize intake, but for the majority of people with diabetes, a moderate protein-rich breakfast is not only safe, it's protective. And now something important becomes clear. None of these steps work in isolation. Water without movement helps but doesn't direct glucose. Movement without protein opens muscles but doesn't sustain stability. Protein without the first two arrives in a system that isn't ready. When these signals are delivered in the right order, the morning stops being your weakest point and becomes the foundation for control the rest of the day. By now, something important should be clicking into place. None of what you've heard works because it's dramatic or extreme. It works because your body responds to signals, and timing determines which signals win. When hydration comes first, you lower the stress response and tell your liver that resources are available. When gentle movement follows your muscles, step in and actively remove glucose from circulation. When protein arrives next, it locks in stability by slowing absorption, protecting muscle, and reinforcing insulin sensitivity. Individually, each step helps. Together in the right order, they create a compounding metabolic effect that lasts far beyond the morning. This is the piece most people miss. Blood sugar control isn't about one habit. It's about sequence. Your metabolism is not a switch, it's a chain reaction. When the first signal is wrong, everything downstream struggles. When the first signal is right, the rest of the day becomes easier, often without additional effort. The silent consequence of ignoring sequence is chronic instability. Even with good intentions, skipping hydration keeps stress hormones elevated. Skipping movement leaves glucose stranded in the bloodstream. Skipping protein allows breakdown to continue and cravings to build. Over time, this pattern reinforces insulin resistance and makes diabetes feel progressively harder to manage. You may have experienced this without understanding why. Some days feel off from the moment you wake up. Energy is unstable. Hunger shows up early. Numbers are unpredictable. It's not because your condition suddenly worsened, it's because the morning signals never aligned. Research on circadian biology and metabolic timing supports this idea clearly. Studies show that insulin sensitivity, glucose uptake, and hormonal balance are all time-dependent, with the early morning acting as a critical programming window. What happens here doesn't just affect fasting glucose, it shapes how your body handles every meal that follows. When the sequence is right, the benefits stack quietly. Post-meal spikes shrink. Energy becomes steadier. Appetite regulates itself. Many people notice fewer crashes, clearer thinking, and more predictable readings without tightening food rules or increasing medication. The system becomes cooperative instead of combative. And this is what makes the approach sustainable. You're not fighting your body, you're working with how it already functions. Instead of reacting to high numbers later in the day, you prevent the conditions that create them in the first place. From a safety standpoint, this sequence is conservative and adaptable. It doesn't rely on extremes, deprivation, or strain. It respects individual limits and can be adjusted without breaking the underlying logic. That's why it works across ages, activity levels, and stages of metabolic health. At this point, the question is no longer whether these habits matter. The real question is whether you allow mornings to keep running on autopilot or whether you take control of the one window that quietly determines everything that comes after. Because when you understand this sequence, something shifts. You stop chasing blood sugar all day and start setting the conditions where stability happens naturally. And that's where the real change begins, not with fear, but with control, clarity, and a morning that finally works in your favor. At this point, the most important thing to remember is this: you are not powerless when it comes to your blood sugar. What you've just learned isn't about perfection, and it isn't about doing everything at once. It's about understanding how your body works and using that knowledge to make smarter choices one morning at a time. You don't need to change your entire life starting tomorrow. Start small, start simple, drink water as soon as you wake up, move your body gently for a few minutes, choose protein as your first real meal of the day. These may seem like minor actions, but when they're done in the right order, they send powerful signals that your body understands immediately. Most people begin noticing changes within just a few days: steadier energy, fewer spikes, and more predictable numbers. Over time, those small wins add up to real control. And if you're watching this while feeling worried, tired, or discouraged, know this: you're not alone. Managing blood sugar can feel overwhelming, especially when information is confusing or incomplete. That's exactly why this channel exists, to break down medical research clearly, honestly, and without hype, so you can make informed decisions about your health. If this video helped you see your mornings differently, save it so you can come back to it whenever you need a reset. And if you want to stay updated with the latest evidence-based insights on blood sugar control, metabolic health, and simple daily habits that actually work, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You're also welcome to join the conversation. Let me know in the comments which morning habit you're starting with: water, movement, or protein. Your experience may help someone else who's struggling silently. Your health isn't about fear or blame. It's about understanding consistency and giving your body the signals it needs to function better, starting today.